What's an unexplainable and creepy thing you have seen in broad daylight? In 2013 I, 19F, at the time, decided to take up jogging. The city had nice waterfront trails that were usually busy, so one morning before work I went out for a run at 6 a.m. Turns out the trail was actually empty at that time of day. I reached a long straight stretch that's isolated, near a patch of woods, and there's a man sitting on a lawn chair fishing. I knew that area only had water an inch deep and has never had fish, so he's just sitting there with a line in the rocks, really. He's also aggressively glaring at me the whole time I'm approaching and wearing purple medic's gloves. Creeped out, I muted my music but kept my headphones in. I was walking at this point, catching my breath. As I passed him, he kept glaring, and I got a look at his tackle box. It was full of tools, like a hatchet and a hammer. No fishing supplies. I walked by and after a few steps I got a bad feeling and instinctively looked over my shoulder. He had gotten up silently and was right behind me. I ran for it and didn't stop until I reached a busy parking lot. To this day I wish I'd reported it. My dad's first cousin went missing jogging early in the morning like this in his sleepy hometown of only about 7,000 people about 20 years ago now. There is, however, 2 interstate highways nearby. Most people in the family point to a really aggressive/abusive at the time boyfriend who claims she went out for a morning jog and never returned, which I think is probably who is responsible. Several years later he was in a fight with his new GF and threatened that he could make her disappear. But, perhaps there's a sliver of me that wonders if maybe he actually is telling the truth. I know Israel Keys for example confessed to finding women in isolated, vulnerable spots where he would take his flights to and ambush them for example. This happened in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada in 1987. A woman was walking up the Kingsway on the sidewalk. A pickup truck drove up onto the sidewalk, and knocked her down. The driver calmly got out of the truck, picked her up, threw her in, got back into the truck, and drove off. All the while she was screaming. I took the truck's license number, and phoned the RCMP. I've no idea whatever happened to her. Husband and I were driving through a 4-way traffic light intersection listening to music when both of us saw a bright flash, like, fill the car. Then we were suddenly about 4 houses down from the traffic light that was now blinking red from all sides. Music was off, the radio and the phone plugged into the O were both suddenly turned off, and my car's clock was flashing. Craziest shit, neither of us could explain it, especially when the light was freshly green as we were going under it, so we definitely didn't accidentally run a red. 2000, was 10 years old. Was laying on the ground in a parking lot after playing catch with my dad. It was dusk, and nearly dark out. We both were looking up and saw what looked like the Iron Giant, flying through the sky. It's the only way I can describe it. It looked like a robot flying with its arms in front, flying like Superman. It was dead silent, and made no vibrations and even banked to turn just like Superman would. We looked at each other and I asked him what he just saw, and he described exactly what I did. Never saw anything like that ever again. I am sure there is a logical explanation for it, and this was in East Boston, Massachusetts, which is basically in Logan Airport. So likely some kind of plane or something. Sometime in the early 90s, let's say like 90 to 92, I was 10 years old or so at a park playing with a lot of children. We all heard a loud explosion and looked up. This was the first time I had ever heard an actual sonic boom. What we saw, I can only describe as a gymnast baton, floating through the air, silently, while slowly rotating, like when a gymnast chucks their baton into the air and it's flipping. It was rather high up in the sky, where planes fly, but it was bigger than a plane. It was silent. The shaft was silver and the ends were these large red geodesic dome-type things, like a dodecahedron. Behind it were 2 F-16s that had scrambled after it. I'm guessing the sonic boom was from the F-16s. The UFO was silent as an owl. All the kids ran to our respective parents and chaos ensued. Imagine a group of screaming 10-year-olds trying to explain to our parents what we just saw. This was the only time I saw something unidentifiable with other people. Appearing not homeless, man in ballet pants washing his asshole in one of those pop jet fountains at the park. Prob not the type of answer you're looking for, but I can't explain why anyone would do that. My so and I watched a guy getting a blowjob in broad daylight on a street in Seattle, while many people passed by, think families with strollers, and he had a blood-filled syringe hanging out of his arm. bobbing up and down in movement with the BJ. He looked about too odd, but we couldn't really stop to chat, and the blowjobber looked capable of screaming for Narcan if so needed. We decided to move shortly thereafter. I love Seattle so much, but living that near the downtown homeless problem was bad. It was fascinating watching people try to pretend they weren't there, a few feet off the sidewalk. Ugh. I grew up across the street from a public park that had a large wooded area. In my early teens, 13 to 14, I would often hike there alone. I was walking the trails one afternoon and became suspicious of a man that was hiking behind me. He was staying back from me, but also staying close enough that he wouldn't lose line of sight. I turned onto a different trail and he turned and continued to follow me on the same trail. Deciding I wanted to lose him, I turned off the trail into the woods. I knew the area well and wasn't worried about getting lost. He immediately turned off the trail and followed me into the underbrush. I took off running and was able to lose him and get back to a busy road that ran alongside of the park. I'm pretty certain I would have been done for had he caught up to me. I used to walk home from middle school through an elementary school property. I would skirt the edge of the school, walking behind/between two temporary learning trailers set up in back that had been there for a decade. I never saw anyone else outside, as the kids were still in school. Very few people walked the same route I did. I was always alone. I only knew there were other people that sometimes walked it because of trash that would accumulate. One day I walked between the trailers and there was a bloody handprint on one of them. I knew it hadn't been there before, and there was no evidence of blood anywhere else. Very creepy. It stayed until it weathered away too. No one ever cleaned it up. I was with my little guy at the park on a busy evening. Really nice neighborhood in LA. There was always an older man who would show up early evening and play instruments and blow bubbles for the kids. He's there and kids are gathered around him. I look away to tend to my kid, and when I turn back around, Music Man is wearing a latex pig mask. Like from a Saw movie, just the creepiest mask you've ever seen. He's just staring right at me. I grabbed our stuff and left. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon on a bright and sunny California day. I was driving a coworker home after our shift. We were going to smoke weed at his place. About a block away from his apartment building, an animal of some sort darts in front of my car. It was running too quickly for me to get a good look at it, but this was sadly not my first experience having hit an animal with a vehicle before. A coyote ran in front of my family's car on trip to Yosemite when I was a child, so I was familiar with the distinct crunch of a car running over an animal. Worried that I've just killed somebody's dog that got loose, I immediately pulled over to the side of the road and started looking around for the poor animal. It wasn't in the street, so I figured it must have kept running off while injured. I looked in the direction that it came from and the direction that I figured it must have continued running, and there was no sign of any animal at all. I inspected my car for damage and there was nothing. No blood, no fur. It was as if I hadn't hit anything at all. Shaken up, my coworker and I agreed to skip smoking weed that afternoon. His apartment wasn't even a full block away from where I hit whatever it is that I hit, so I quickly dropped him off and start to go home. While waiting at a red light, I glanced down the street towards where the collision occurred and saw something I cannot explain, nor will I ever forget. It wasn't a dog. It more closely resembled a deer, but it was all wrong. It was massive. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, including its antlers. It was entirely black, and unnaturally thin, as if its skin was clinging to its bones. What freaked me out the most was that it was limping. This was definitely what I hit with my car. But how? Never mind the fact that I don't believe in the supernatural, how could I have hit something so huge and not noticed it? How could something so big not leave any trace of damage on my car? The light turned green and I drove forward. I immediately made an illegal U-turn after the intersection. I needed to get a second look at whatever this thing was. But when I brought my car back around again, it was gone without a trace, as if it had vanished into thin air. I consider myself a logical and rational person. I'm not religious, nor do I believe in the supernatural. But I have no earthly idea what I hit with my car that day. In the summer of 2019, I went out to a lake a little south of the city I live in with a few friends. Rode down with 2 of them. As we're coming back home, it's starting to hit twilight. Light, not dark, but light is fading. As we're coming through the outskirts of the city, through the old downtown of one of the absorbed communities, there's a woman standing on the corner with a gray trench coat and a large black brimmed hat. I remember mentioning something to the other 2 people in the car about how weird it was for someone to be dressed like that in the middle of summer, but oh well. As we went along further, we rolled up into the more suburban area, and there she was again. Like 2 miles down the road. Gray trench coat and a big black brimmed hat. Same side of the street and everything. I've brought it up to both friends since and neither remember it happening despite the fact we all flipped shit over it too. I'll admit, I like to people watch. And people are strange. I've witnessed countless times someone battling themselves, trying to stop lunging or attacking random people who had their back turned. Like they suddenly get this animalistic urge to tear flesh? Most likely drugs or mental illness. Nonetheless, it's quite jarring, and for a moment, my brain jumps to the zombie apocalypse is starting in front of me. Was home alone, saw a guy walking his dog. I went to door to check the mail. I saw a shadow of the man and the dog coming toward the door. I ran to kitchen and at the door was a black silhouette just standing there. Didn't knock or nothing, just stood there. Usually you can see the color of the clothes, but all I saw was all black like a shadow person. I turned back and ran to living room. Looked out the window and the dog and man was gone, nowhere to be seen, so I don't know what that was about. I was standing on the sidewalk outside my apartment near downtown Atlanta so I could get a signal on my phone while talking to my boyfriend. I lived on the street that separated a good but sort of rundown neighborhood from a rough but friendly neighborhood full of blue-collar families. I stood on the sidewalk talking to my BF, who lived in Florida and thought Atlanta was scary and dangerous. Way down the sidewalk I was standing on, maybe 12 blocks away, I could see someone or something slowly moving in my direction. I was having a long, friendly conversation with my BF, just chatting, and, as whatever it was got closer to me, I started to first mention it to BF, and then give updates. Hey, sorry to interrupt, there's something coming my way down the sidewalk. No, I can't tell, it's too far away. It seems like something, black? Maybe an inflated hefty bag? But there are like, silver flashes? It's barely moving. 5 minutes pass, okay. It's a little closer. Definitely some black sort of round object. A homemade car or wagon? And there's a person, running around it? Kneeling? 10 more minutes, 6 blocks away. Yeah, it's still coming. It's really moving slowly. It must be extremely heavy. There's a woman in a white shirt that is like flashing, or something. She doesn't seem to have any pants on. 5 more minutes, whispering into the phone. Whoa, okay, it's a huge black metal grill. But not just any grill. This is like a professional grill and smoker combo. It's the size of, like a Volkswagen Beetle, seriously, and it's got a bunch of tools hanging off of it and clanking around. Man, this grill probably costs like $3,000, seriously. It's got teak accents and everything. How is she moving this all by herself? She's so little. Where is she going? The person moving the grill was a teeny tiny, model thin young black woman. She was wearing very high, shiny black patent leather stilettos, bad shoes for walking, much less moving a 2-ton grill, and she had on a vintage beaded white flapper-type dress that came down to her mid-thigh and threw blinding silver spangles off of it in the afternoon sun. She was hard to look at, she was so sparkly, and was in vivid contrast to the dark metal of her burden. The woman was very smartly dressed, and was obviously on her way to a fancy get-together, to which she had apparently pledged to bring a grill. Her back was to me as she labored to move the grill a few inches at a time. She had hold of a rope attached to the side of the grill, and she'd face the grill and basically fall backwards down to the ground on her bottom, which would yank the grill toward her ever so slightly. She did this over and over in the August sun, just another summer afternoon in the ATL. When she got about 10 feet away from me, I, still on the phone, hopped up on a small patch of grass to give her room to pass. Hang on, I said into the phone, I gotta talk to this lady. The woman in her grill finally came even with me. She was looking down at the ground, concentrating. Man, you sure picked a hot day to tote your grill, I said to the side of her smooth black bob. But I love your dress. The woman looked up at me and graced me with a wide, friendly smile, which was almost obscured by a short, thick beard and mustache. Thank you, baby, she cried. She seemed as delighted to see me as I was her. When I saw her beard, I understood that, though this person had great taste in clothing and looked fantastic, this was probably someone who made their living on the street, and who was probably stealing this grill from the Emory grads in the new condos further down the block. Still, though, they were working so hard, and sticking with it. I hope you get where you're going, I called, as they bent and heaved and dipped and hauled. A dazzling, hirsute inchworm in their cast iron prey. You too. They sang out from behind the domed lid. Ah, Atlanta. How I loved you and your people and places. You fed my soul when it needed feeding. You aren't like this at all today, but I'm so blessed to have known you back then. This was back in the summer of 2017, when I was 13 years old. At the time, I was living in a trailer deep in the holler. We had a creek in our backyard, where there were crawfish, algae eaters, small fish and snakes. The creek would also have some weird things in it, like a broken meth pipe I once found. One day, I found something really strange. It was some kinda weird bloated animal carcass that I couldn't even identify. I don't exactly know what was weird about it, but I'm guessing that it was because it was some strange unidentifiable animal. I was also deep into the woods when I found it, so I reckon that added to the eerie feeling of the situation. Since it's been a long time, I can hardly remember what the carcass looked like, but it had a kinda dark pink color and it seemed to have no hair or anything on its body. There were no distinguishable features either, like a head or limbs, so I really couldn't make a guess on what the animal was. I reckon this is tame compared to what others have shared, but this is probably the strangest thing I've seen in broad daylight. Happened in the mid to late 90s. Was camping with family at a local state park and we decided to hike down to an old abandoned cemetery within the park we were camping at. The cemetery was at least 100 if not 150 years old or more. It was just in the middle of the forest surrounded by a stone wall. About 10 to 20 graves. This park apparently had a few settlements in it prior to being a state park, or even a state for that matter. But nothing is really left except for some old foundations and this cemetery. We started getting weird vibes and my siblings and I decided to needed to go. It just felt off. As my siblings and I were walking out on the trail we all started commenting how it felt like we were being watched. I swear to this day that I would see human-shaped shadows in the woods off trail and every time I would turn to look back I would see a human-shaped shadow dart across the trail or disappear back into the woods. My siblings claimed they saw the same things when they would look. We picked up the pace and got out of there and quickly as we could. We spent one more night at camp, which was a mile or so away from where this cemetery was. None of us got any real sleep that night and we all decided to just kinda hang by the fire till morning when we packed up and left. I saw a guy follow a 17-year-old girl, as in the girl was crossing the street back and forth like 3 times in one block and the guy would just follow her. The girl noticed me and asked me the time even though it was obvious I didn't have a watch. I walked with her for like 2 blocks until we got to my house, which was an accomplishment for my antisocial. I still feel bad about not walking her home, but back then I couldn't think how to say I wanted to walk her home without sounding as creepy as the guy following her. It was 2014 and I was 19. I was driving with my dad to Walmart and I was kinda a depressed loner so I didn't have my phone on me. What's the point, no one will text anyway. Same thing with my dad. My mom was asleep, he had left her a note and his daughter was right next to him, right? So we are on our way to Walmart when at the same time we both noticed these giant flaming fireballs in the sky. From our distance away they looked to be the size of minivans. They had flame tails and everything, they were just huge flame balls. They started to do geometric dances and when they turned you could see the tail of the flame. There were 5 total. They slowly started to make a spiral shape and as they did the flames started to disappear. 5. Geometric dance. 4 geometric dance. 3. Geometric dance. 2 geometric dance. Almost a circle at this point, and then lastly 1. They faded away. No one else on the road saw them. Or behaved like they did. Not in broad daylight, but at night. It was around 8:30 p.m. and I was cleaning some dishes, when I heard something weird outside. Almost sounded like a baboon. I grab my phone and go outside, and there's like a weird screeching noise coming from my neighbor's tree, along with a woo-woo noise. After the screeching stopped, I went behind my shed to see if anything was there. Then I hear the loudest screeching I've heard in a while coming from my neighbor's tree. I look up, and see 2 eyes staring me down from the tree. I immediately noped out, went inside and showed my sister the footage I took. She was just as confused as me. I'd if you're joking or not, but I honestly had an encounter very similar to this somewhere between 2017 to 2019. I know it was pre-COVID but I really don't remember the year. I was taking my partner to work early one morning and we came to a stop sign where we watched 2 PPL cross the other side of the intersection in a manner that I can only describe as just like the alien in Men in Black. He had a long coat on and a woman was following behind him. His balance and gait were so unnatural that I wanted to take my phone out and record, but as I grabbed my phone I got this crazy weird scary feeling that he could be at my car window before I could open my camera app, which would be crazy because I was at the opposite side of the intersection. We watched them cross and like a weird WTF is that shock, and it was still dark outside so they kinda just disappeared into the darkness, but it also felt like they really kinda vanished randomly. My partner and I are still together and every once in a while we bring it up like, yo, you remember that time? WTF did we see? She also can confirm that she got a weird, uneasy, hair-raising feeling the whole time we watched. I've been wanting to post about this forever, but since the interaction was less than a minute I didn't think it was worth a 10-word post, but wow, look, sentences. And no, they weren't junkies or drug addicts, the shit was truly strange. My hair is beginning to stand up on my head just thinking about it again. Weirdest shit I've ever seen in my life. Not exactly unexplainable, but I find drug addicts creepy as hell. Especially the loud ones or the ones that stare at you as you walk past them. It's not a please give me some money stare, it's a I'ma strangle you as soon as you turn around stare. When we were 7, Mum took my cousin Elle and I over Hounslow Heath for our usual adventures that were common in the summer holidays. Instead of the regular route, we used to love collecting feathers and other natural things that we found to make collages with, or picking fat juicy blackberries off bushes for our gran to make pies with. Mum took us to one of her old haunts as a child called Paradise. Paradise was thought to have been the location of either an old coaching inn or a powder mill and was just a very stark, bare massive open field with skeletal remains of ancient-looking stones and wood buildings. Very old tree stumps were scattered throughout the field. Over the years Paradise had fallen victim to random attacks of arson, and the local council burning the field to keep it from becoming overgrown and unmanageable, so the appearance of Paradise was more desolate and bleak due to the burnt stubbles of grass and charred tree stumps along with the still strong and slightly sickly smell of smoke in the air, especially when the wind caught up. The obvious differences between the otherwise lush and green area around Paradise, and Paradise itself was clear to Elle and I immediately, and we said aloud at the same time. The burnt place. I felt uneasy straight away, and looking at Elle I could tell she did too. Although Elle was and still is close with her feelings, when you grow up you know how they feel about certain things. I was in my wheelchair investigating the ground around me, and Elle was a little distance off. Mum was looking at something else. Suddenly, Elle looked up at me and said, "Shiv, can you hear anything?" I was suddenly struck by the deathly silence of the immediate area. Normally the heath was alive with the comforting sound of birds, insects and small animals. It was a constant, like a soundtrack to our play, but that day there was not a sound, nor, come to mention it, was there any evidence of any living thing. In fact, I couldn't remember seeing any animals or birds since we got to Paradise. I said this to Elle and we both looked at the sky before continuing to investigate the burnt ground. Looking carefully I came to the awful realization that the ground was scattered with small animal skeleton bones and skulls, charred and dirty, while left overrun years of fires. Elle and I looked at each other and said at the same time, "Can we please go now?" Mom looked at us both and laughed. "What's wrong with you two?" We told her about the unearthly silence and the small animal skeletons. Mom just explained that it was only to be expected from a dead area, but she didn't say much about the silence. She just listened and then said, "Okay, let's go back." When we got home, we told our gran about it and we talked all night about it. Now we are adults and Elle has got children of her own. They ask us about our childhood and sometimes we tell them spooky, funny stories, but anytime we both mention Paradise it's always with uneasiness. Not me, but my mom once told me back when she was young in Lebanon she saw a small boy playing around with a bomb not knowing what it was and it went off and he died right there and then, body parts all over the place. Yeah. In my younger years me and my neighborhood friends used to explore the woods and creek behind some of the houses. The woods were actually pretty big and the older we got the further we would go in. We found traps everywhere in the trees, like serious traps. Armed bear traps, tree traps with dead squirrels in them, trip wires, etc. Went a little further and found a sleeping bag with tarps and food packages / beer. Noped the hell out of there. Me and my family were on a trip in Washington driving in the snow. We were driving on a single-line small road with a gray car behind us. It was following us for about 5 minutes when it just disappeared. There were no other roads, and no marks in the snow for where the car had gone. So yeah, ghost cars and now a thing. Great. A metallic-looking flying saucer. About 40 at max width, 20 to 25 at max height, hovering 40-ish above the backyard of a rural home. A year or two after I moved to my current town, very old town, built in the 1800s, I remember driving past one of the abandoned buildings which had been there for a very long time. It had 2 floors. Something told me to look up in the second floor window. When I did, I remember seeing a slightly translucent woman. She had dark hair and was wearing a nice, white dress. She looked to be in her early 20s. She was smiling slightly and waved at me. I remember when I saw her that I completely froze up and it seemed like time slowed down. Remember, this building was abandoned. I remember asking my older brother about it later, who had an interest in urban history and researched a lot about the buildings in this town. He said that back in the 1900s, there was a family who lived on the second floor of that building, but he was unsure if anyone died up there. I remember it very vividly to this day, and it was about 7 years ago now. The building has since been bought and then sold again. The person who bought it went bankrupt. Coincidence? Probably, but who knows lol. This wasn't my experience, it was my auntie and cousins. My auntie heard my cousin screaming in the bathtub and asked her what was wrong. She said there was a bloody man in the mirror, man covered in blood. My auntie was so freaked out that she couldn't shower in the nude while living there. Another one would be when my mom had witnessed a guy jump from the same building she worked in. She was so horrified by the event she walked past slowly without looking while acting like it never happened. Not my story, but my friend's mother went to a few parties with Ted Bundy. I mean, may not have been scary at the moment, but can you imagine? UK here. Old house, Church Street, Shoreham by Sea. Go look at it on Google Maps and you'll see how close it is to a graveyard. Facing window in front of me, I was back to the doorway. Could see what I thought was my girlfriend standing in the doorway reflected in the window whilst sorting some printed stuff for the next day. Just a woman shape lit from behind as hall light was on round the corner. Winter so dark outside, light off on room apart from a little desk lamp as I was finishing up. Said hi, you're back early. No response. Thought she might be playing with phone or something. Glanced at window, still there. Said hey again. No response. Though that was odd, so turned around, I froze. Hair on back of neck stood up. Goosebumps, adrenaline dump, etc. Temperature in room instantly dropped and I could see my breath. Hovering in the doorway was a black womanly shape. No feet. I could see the edge of its features as if it was lit by moonlight, as well as kind of edge details on clothes which looked to be 17th century kinda style. It looked at me, and I could tell it was utterly evil. I blinked and it was gone, and the room instantly warmed up. Rang my mom in panic, saying I'd seen this thing. She still remembers the call. Few weeks later, parking my car. Got chatting to a neighbor, and at Ray end of the convo he kinda jokingly asked if I'd seen the black shape yet. Sort of attitude he'd laugh it off if I said no. Was around October, so Halloween stuff was about. I said yes and explained what I saw, and he said his family had seen it and it traveled up and down the row of houses. Sometimes it went away for ages. Now look at Google Maps again. That church was a navigation point for ships, as when it was built it could be seen from the sea. It's super old. My theory is that the houses on Church Street could have been Buicked over the old graveyard from the church. Years ago I was out bass fishing by myself. As I approached a point, extended bank, I noticed a tree trunk extending into the water and began casting my bait toward it as I floated parallel to the point. Suddenly I saw what I thought was a gray toy poodle walking down the tree trunk to the water. Except it had a big bushy tail and its fur wasn't curly. My mind struggled to comprehend that I was seeing what had to be about a 10-inch tall, 10-pound gray squirrel with a tail bigger around than my wrist. Couldn't be. They don't get that big. Even red squirrels don't grow that large. But there it was, right in front of my eyes. There's nothing else it could have been. I watched as it came down the log, drank from the lake, and walked back up the log. No cell phones back then, I was alone and didn't have a camera. Of course. But I swear it's the truth. Still blows my mind. Not a deer. Several times. They're common by my hometown and the old ranchers/hunters say they're just diseased and won't hunt them. Doesn't make it any less unsettling when you see one and it looks all wrong and may or may not attack you/your dog/your car. They're not only janky looking as hell but they're aggressive, like, they charge you or throw themselves at your moving vehicle kind. Two things. One was actually during the night. I was watching TV when I was either in middle school or elementary school when my mom comes downstairs excitedly telling to come to the living room upstairs. I follow her and we look out the window where there's a weird circular light in the overcast sky spinning around fast in a circle, sort of like a spotlight hitting the clouds, but there was no visible direction it was coming from, no visible light beam present. There were no sounds of any aircraft like a heli as well if the light was coming from above the clouds, so we had no idea what was going on. She told me that before she came and got me. The light was splitting into smaller circles and crashing into a larger one as they spinning the same circular pattern. Traffic seemed to notice it as well because it was backed up on my street as if people were observing the light. My cousins near the neighborhood called sometime later saying they saw the same thing and that their power went out. Second thing was around middle school. I was taking a dump and as I'm looking out my bathroom into the hallway, I see something completely black running past the bathroom towards my older sister's room. It was like a large animal running on all fours or something. After I finished, I asked her if she saw anything but she did not. I never had any history with hallucinations back then and to this day, and I still have no idea how to explain what I saw that day. My friend and I were hiking and walking her dog at Wildlife Refuge. We were in a remote area and hiked down to a beach area, up against the Missouri River. We found a bunch of clothes scattered about like they were dumped. A woman's shirt, pants and shoes. What was unsettling is it was like April, so the water is cold and also not really a place people should swim, because Wildlife Refuge and the water is dirty and the current is very fast there. It was creepy. I've seen unidentified aerial phenomenons a few times. One was the cigar-shaped type flying low over us. The others were zipping around close together, like a pinball machine with a bunch of balls going all over the place. I saw a flame flying through the air about 5 feet above my car while I was driving at night. It was shaped like a Barbie doll with her arms straight out by her side like this, but with both arms out, and sitting at the kitchen table with my son when a beep sound came from my arm. We both looked at my arm then at each other and asked, "Did you hear that too?" Lots of these stories aren't really unexplainable. Scary, yes, but I feel like this thread was supposed to have more of a supernatural sort of tone to it rather than just scary things humans do to each other. This happened in the UK. When I was a kid in the 2000s, I looked up at the sky one day and I saw a low-flying plane with 3 tails. I couldn't get my parents to look up in time, but it looked like a Lockheed Constellation. I googled and that's a very rare plane. There's only a few in the world and only 1 or 2 are actually flyable, and those are in America. To this day I don't know if I saw something very rare or some time warp. Just creepy, not unexplainable. A decomposing cat. Originally saw it fresh. Nobody disposed the body, so it just stayed in front of a house. I named it Dave. I just moved in a friend and found out that the toad I've been curiously eyeballing each time I go smoke on his back porch contains his dead cat. It died 2 months ago and he threw it in a tote and left it there on the porch. I promptly buried it the following morning. I opened the tote just a tiny bit to make sure dude wasn't messing with me, and no, he wasn't. Poor cat. I was with my ex in Seoul. He'd just taken me up to the mountains, which he told me were often believed to be haunted. Anyway, he is really excited about showing me Korean trains, so he walks me down to a platform that isn't being used, that just has one nice modern Korean train parked in it. He's telling me about the train and being a proud Korean he's excited about all the features. This young woman comes down the stairs. She looks different as her hair is white, which isn't very common in Korea. She comes down onto the platform, not looking like she's going anywhere or after a train or anything, just quietly aloof, but walks down near us. At the time we just assumed it was some edgy girl with bleached hair who was lost, right up until she was there, then she wasn't. It was like, we saw her, turned back and she was gone. We both said, where did she go? As there was only the steps to get out and there's no way she could have walked along the platform and walked up the stairs and disappeared in that time. We also didn't see her anywhere when we went back up. He believed we brought a ghost back from the mountains. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.